Coming up next on Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable, the governor and legislative leaders agree on a proposed budget, and we'll discuss Arizona's redistricting case heard this week by the U.S. Supreme Court. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining us tonight, Mary Jo Pitzel of the Arizona Republic, Jeremy Duda of the Arizona Capital Times, and Jim Small of the Arizona Capital Times. The legislature is working on a budget agreement between leadership and Governor Doug Ducey, but the budget itself and the apparent rush to pass the proposal are raising concerns. All right, Mary Jo, what exactly is going on down there? Why the rush, and what is the reaction to the rush and the plan?
Well, the rush is because, at least earlier in the week, the GOP legislative leaders and Governor Ducey apparently felt that they had enough votes to make this happen. So let's get it out there and let's have it done by the weekend. And the weekend's not over. I mean, it hasn't really begun yet, so there's a possibility. But once people started to see the details, things started to fall apart. And these are details that a lot of members didn't see coming. Some had only had one prior budget briefing before this was sprung on them.
Yeah, the fact that so much of this was done with leadership and the governor behind closed doors, that's not necessarily unusual, is it?
No, that's kind of the way it's been going. But I think there were a lot of changes to this budget that we saw Governor Ducey unveil back in January, and I think perhaps they saw that there was a lot of folks who felt pretty good about that one. You drop a bunch of changes all of a sudden, and then a lot of these lawmakers, they're not so pleased with this. Especially you saw this giant increase in university cuts from 75 million to 104 million. I mean, that's really cost, at least so far, costing them some votes. Handful of other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the consternation on this really is indicative of a lack of communication from leadership back to members as this thing was going through the process. I mean, as they were meeting with the governor's office and governor's staff, and they were kind of coordinating and trying to negotiate this stuff, it was apparent that there really wasn't a whole lot of, none of that information was making its way downhill and coming back to the members in the caucus. And so when this deal got basically unveiled on Tuesday night, that was the first time a lot of people had seen anything. And so, they did walk in there and it went from, okay, we know what the governor proposed in January. We know kind of nebulously what we talked about doing 6 weeks earlier, but to actually see what those talks turned into in terms of an actual product and what they were able to negotiate with the governor, I think really caught a lot of people off guard and had people going, well, wait a second, I didn't want this part, or I didn't think it was going to look like this at the end of the day.
And I think another reason for the rush, I mean, because this is the first week of March, but the governor said this morning, he goes, well, what are we waiting for? I've had my budget plan out there since mid-January. This is 99% of what I wanted, and more on that later. But I think there's some bragging points maybe that were being sought here. Like, we got this budget out early. There has, at least in recent history, there has not been a budget that has come out this early. We're like, the 55th day of the legislative session. In the 90s, when Mark Killian was speaker, they got a budget or two out by the 65th day. So there's a sense that maybe there's a rush to get this done. And remember, this whole process started off with the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate standing up with the governor when he unveiled right before he unveiled his budget in mid-January, showing unity. We haven't necessarily seen that for a while.
But it's one thing to show unity and say you got it done in 60, 70, whatever the days you want to have it done. But it's obvious the votes aren't there. Did they not count beforehand? What's?
They certainly miscounted, and maybe in that rush to get things out and get those bragging points that Mary Jo is referring to, they might have overlooked the fact that some of these members who didn't know what was coming would oppose that. And it does certainly seem like they're trying to kind of, you always hear that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it seems like they're kind of trying to make it into a sprint for the sake of saying, look how well we're all getting along, starting with, Ducey and Gowan and Biggs all standing together, and, there's a lot of things holding it up right now, though.
But Jim, what's the relationship between leadership and the rank and file down there? If for leadership to even think that we're going to show it to you Tuesday night, we want it done by Friday.
Well, I think that there was certainly some assumption that A, rank and file would largely follow leadership, and B, that rank and file I think would follow the governor. And that's something that we've heard is the things that have been talked about in these meetings as they're trying to cajole people into supporting this budget is, look, it's called, someone describes it to me as the honeymoon speech. You know, look, we're still, you know, we need to not stand up against the governor. We can't have this become a contentious relationship where the legislature is you know, basically thumbing its nose at this conservative Republican governor that we all wanted. And oh, hey, remember how much more we liked him better than Jan Brewer, who was out there and antagonistic and fighting us, and we really want to get along with him. And that's an argument that I'm sure will work with some people. I think there's no doubt that there's going to be some Republicans who will be swayed by that. But there's a lot that it won't work for because they have serious policy issues, policy concerns with this budget.
When you say there's a lot, what are we looking at? And if you're counting now, what are you seeing?
Right now, as it stands, I mean, it looks like there are probably 4 or 5 Republicans in the Senate. I'd say probably 4 solid in the Senate that aren't on, unless they get any Democratic votes. If they can lose no more than 1.
Can they get any Democratic votes?
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. There's rumors that there's 1 Democrat vote that's in the air, but we'll see. We'll know more when this thing goes to the floor at some point. In the House, you know, the numbers there earlier this week were maybe around 8. By this morning, I mean, people were saying this number was well over 10. It was probably more like 15 to 20 at various points throughout the day of people who maybe weren't no's, but were definitely not yeses. And so folks, a portion of those are going to be firmly committed and they're going to be no's, probably no matter what, or unless major changes are made. Others are either trying to get a pet project funded, or they've got some questions that need to be answered, or they want little tiny maybe tweaks to the budget.
Is university funding the big problem here for most?
Oh yes, you hear that, and the K-12 funding, although because there's even a dispute, you know, does this, I think the safest thing to say is that this budget does not necessarily cut K-12, but the Democrats have a different line on that. You know, is there an increase for K-12? Well, they're funding inflation, but you're supposed to, and they fund enrollment growth, and you're supposed to, and they are putting $74 million in recognition of all the years that the schools weren't getting paid. But so yeah, it comes down to education. Both higher and lower education are big, broadly contested parts of the budget.
That $74 million does not sound exactly like what the judge had suggested.
No, and that might turn into hundreds of millions depending on how these negotiations and how the courts rule. But you don't talk about K-12. Remember, there's also the charter schools now are starting to raise a lot of issues with this, especially with the elimination of the small school weights for schools under 600 students. You know, that's not going to sit well with a lot of people. And the problem with trying to get all these, especially all these House votes, is there's not really one thing that you can do that's going to bring them all on board. They all have different issues. A lot of them, it's the universities. Some it's K-12. Some it's joint technical education districts. One representative wants funding for an Internet Crimes Against Children task force. There's so many different things. And if you start changing that, you might start losing votes on the other end from the folks who don't think the university cuts go high enough, who who wanted more community college cuts, stuff like that. So you push one end, you lose. You gain a vote here, lose one there. I was going to say,
yeah, don't forget community colleges, because this budget zeroes out any support for community colleges. And at least in Maricopa County, that district has made it clear that they're not going to raise tuition to compensate for this. So what does that mean? That
property
means
taxes? I mean, where do you go, Jim? Where do you go with that?
You cut.
You cut, or you look at property tax.
You either cut services or you look at the property tax base. And you know, certainly Maricopa County, I mean, most of the community college district is already funded through the property tax base. And it seems that that's going to be, going forward, if this budget passes, that will be the exclusive source of funding for the community colleges.
Michael Crow's letter, he was not pleased with the governor's initial proposal of $74 million. Is that one of the reasons why you don't like this? How do you like this?
Yeah, it could be. You know, when I first saw the new cuts, one of my first thoughts was, well, you know, maybe Crow shouldn't have, talked so much. But on the other hand, you know, there are folks in the legislature who wanted to go to 140 million in university cuts, and you know, it's down to 104 now. So maybe him talking like that kind of helped blunt the effect of that. But that's another area where they're going to have to try and figure out where to make out that funding. And we're already hearing talk now of, well, tuition increases is probably the way they're going to have to go, which is kind of ironic considering how much Doug Ducey spent last year during the campaign beating up his opponent, Fred Duvall, for raising tuition on the Board of Regents in response to budget cuts.
Is that being discussed down there? I mean, we just talked about property taxes with community colleges. You might have to do tuition or fees for university students. those are de facto, and property taxes those are taxes. Those are revenue increases.
I mean, I think if you look at the state budget over really since the recession, you're seeing increasingly a movement of agencies and state services that are just trying to get off the general fund. You know, either because the legislature is going to kick them off, or their advocates say, look, we're better off not having to go down to the legislature and lobby for our money. We'll just find another way to fund ourselves. I mean, you heard, Regents President Eileen Klein say earlier this year, we need to find a new path.
Right.
You know, it's not cropping up overnight, but I think that's the direction for a lot. DEQ, they're basically off the general fund, the state water agency, although I wonder how long that can stand given the forecasts on drought.
We were mentioning that the House now seems almost more in play than the Senate, and for a variety of reasons. Kirk Adams is up there on the ninth. I mean, he's got the ear of the governor, and he was a Speaker of the House. He knows how to, trade horses. Is Speaker Gowan not? Was he not aware of these kinds of things?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I still really think that at the end of the day, it boils down to a lot of this, just some lack of communication and lack of involvement from people. In terms of the massive confusion and frustration and anger that we've seen in the past 72 hours. But horse trading is an interesting thing because that's typically what ends up happening. And you get to this point and you trade horses, and it's either you're going to be for bills that, say, a holdout legislator has that are moving through the process, trying to either threaten to kill the bills or promise to make sure that they get through, or making changes to the budget proposal. And so far, we really haven't seen much in the way of any indication that they're willing to entertain changes to the budget. I mean, we've heard a little bit that some of that community college funding might have been restored to pick up a few votes. But there's also a lot of talk that, leadership is not going to people and saying, here's what we're willing, we'll address that in the budget for you. And we haven't yet gotten any indication that the governor's office is even considering those kinds of options. And if that's the situation that you have, where it really just it sets you up into a showdown where you're going to have, kind of the unstoppable force and the immovable object, and who's gonna hold out longest, really, and who can hold their breath the longest.
Yeah, and I should note that one of the things that contributed to like these deeper cuts, because this budget does cut more programs than Ducey had proposed in January, is they got rid of two proposals that the governor had to increase revenue. One would have been an increase in the car registration fee, and that was sidelined because they didn't have the votes for it. It would renew the whole debate about, is a fee a tax, and it goes back to the whole big fight over Medicaid expansion. And then also he wanted to cap the homeowner rebate on education funding, and those things have gone by the by, which then you've got to find some way to make up that money, and they're not doing it with new money, they're doing it with program cuts.
And the other thing that they did too that really changed the dynamics was the revenue that they assumed that they'd have going forward. That the revenue, that figure for the upcoming year that they're most directly working on was cut in half essentially in terms of new revenue. So it was about $50 million that got kind of taken out that had to be cut out of the budget.
Which is interesting because economic indicators are showing that things are ticking up. So is this perhaps why there's a rush? Like, let's get this locked in before we see that the economy is doing better than we had forecast and is bringing in more revenue.
Well, we're still not seeing, and even after they were agreeing on lower revenue than they initially thought, we're still not really seeing an agreement on revenue between the legislature and the governor's office, which is something that won't really matter for next year. But we heard this promise from Governor Ducey back in January that we're going to have a structurally balanced budget by the end of fiscal year 17, and whether or not that's actually going to happen depends on whether you ask the ninth floor or whether you ask the legislature, and you're not really talking about that. But so far we haven't, if you look at the legislature's forecast, that's not going to be structurally balanced till fiscal year 18. You ask the governor's office, say, no, it'll be fine by the end of 17.
I was going to say, it sounds, from what I saw, this is not a structurally balanced budget. I mean, not until the end, perhaps on to 17, and you move things forward.
Yeah, correct, and that has to do largely with those revenue assumptions, with how they expect the economy to pick up, and what that means for tax collections.
Okay, so best guess, are we still talking about this next Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or is this a weekend on delivery?
Well, we'll certainly be talking about it regardless of what happens.
Well, you know what I'm saying,
why
Mary
did
Jo.
it fall apart, or why did it pass? And here, it's late Friday. They've yet to bring anything to the floor for any kind of debate and a vote. They seem intent on keeping members there as long as it takes, so through the weekend. But it's not looking good.
Yeah, certainly not over the week. I think, by mid next week, maybe, these things always seem so intractable until one day they just come say, hey, we've got a deal, and everything just,
Yeah.
pours through like that immediately. But
Yeah,
certainly not over the weekend.
Unless the dynamics change and you really see some movement, especially on that higher education funding issue, I don't know that I see a real believable way that they're going to get from point A to point B. Really, it's going to take that to happen. So if that happens tomorrow morning, then great. Then maybe they get movement tomorrow. But barring that happening, I think that we're stuck in a holding pattern.
Okay, we also had an Arizona case heard before the Supreme Court this week as well, which almost gets lost in the fog of the budget talks. This, of course, basically the issue is, what does a legislature mean? That's pretty much what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah, this is what we thought was going to be the big story of the week. The Arizona legislature and the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission were in the Supreme Court in Washington on Monday. The legislature sued a couple of years ago, arguing that the Redistricting Commission lacks the authority under the U.S. Constitution to draw congressional lines, because the Elections Clause of the Constitution says the times, places, and manners of determining elections for a representative shall be determined by the legislatures of the states. They say, well, the Redistricting Commission is not the legislature, only we have that authority. The district court actually ruled against the legislature and said this is part of the legislative process determined by the voters who have legislative powers. But after Monday's hearing, I don't know if that's going to hold up. I've certainly seen a lot of skepticism over whether or not the IRC can win this one after Monday.
Yeah, and indeed, the previous cases, I thought that Kagan and Sotomayor kind of mentioned the fact that previous cases show that what the commission did is part of the legislative process that applies. But also, if it doesn't apply, what happens to the initiative process?
Well, it'll be interesting. I don't know if there's going to be what the impact will be broadly on the initiative process, and even the impact that this is going to have on redistricting commissions across the country, I think remains to be seen on how broadly or narrowly they tailor this opinion if it goes in the legislature's favor. But it certainly, the other thing it does call into question, and this was an issue raised by the IRC and by some of the groups supporting it, is that, look, there's a lot of other election regulation laws that have been done at the ballot box. That when Jeremy talks about the Elections Clause, legislatures regulating the time, manner, and place of elections. I mean, this whole issue of the manner of elections. So voter ID laws that are passed at the ballot box, do those come into question? Are those subject to basically being rejected as unconstitutional because the legislature didn't do it? Any number of other voter regulation type laws that have been passed in recent years by voters. There's an argument to be made that a ruling, depending on how it's crafted, could really wipe out a lot of those.
And that would be interesting, because a lot of those were pushed by the same side that's pushing to get the responsibility back for drawing these boundaries.
Sure. I mean, your initiatives, in any given year, the initiatives might come, from people who lean more towards the left or the right. What's interesting about this case also is that this is the second time that we've had an independent redistricting commission draw the congressional lines. And again, we're only talking about congressional lines here. The legislative map is a separate issue. And in the last decade, when the commission drew the congressional lines, there were no problems. There were no complaints. And some people look at that and say, well, geez, is that because that last map favored Republicans? This map, arguably, it doesn't really favor Democrats, but it creates 3 swing districts, 2 safe Democratic seats, 3 safe Republican districts. So that gives the Democrats a lot more room to play in.
Well, with the questioning, again, as everyone said, it did seem relatively sharp. It took Kennedy, seemed like everyone's watching Kennedy, seemed like he was kind of going on both sides of this as well. Any indication where the court's leaning?
Well, Kennedy, he asked some pretty probing questions at both sides. He really hit the legislature's lawyer on, what does this do to other voter-approved laws? Yeah. But he seemed like he had a much sharper statement for the Redistricting Commission when they were discussing the legislature issue and whether that applies to the people. Can this power be delegated? And the point he raised, and he'd kind of picked up on this from a couple of the other conservative justices, is go back to the 17th Amendment when that was passed, that prior to that, only state legislatures could choose U.S. senators. There was no way for the voters to do that themselves, and it needed the 17th Amendment to do that. And as Kennedy was pointing this out to Seth Waxman, the IRC's lawyer, he said, history works very much against you here. And from a lot of the veteran court watchers in D.C. I've been reading, it seems like they're viewing that as kind of the more definitive statement coming out of Justice Kennedy. You also had Chief Justice Roberts, who was pretty quiet during these arguments, but he was asking questions kind of along the same lines about does this was the 17th Amendment basically irrelevant? Was that not needed?
Yeah, Alito and Scalia both said they couldn't find anything in the Constitution with the IRC's meaning, and obviously it looks like they are leaning that way. If the court, let's say, what are we looking at, June, or when are we looking? June?
Yeah.
If the court comes back and says, nope, back to the legislature, what happens? What goes on? Besides a mad stampede to who knows what?
Well, I think all of our vacations get canceled if we come running back to the Capitol. I mean, the legislature is going to be then tasked with drawing a new map, and they'll have to do that pretty quickly. Secretary of State's office has said that realistically they need it done by October 1st. So, the counties are going to need some time to get stuff going, especially if they have to draw new precincts. And there's a lot of just kind of technical stuff that has nothing to do with creating the boundaries, but it kind of implementing the boundaries that needs to happen. So, you're looking at probably in short order a special session. I mean, late June, maybe early July-ish, you're going to have a special session, and you're going to have 90 legislators being tasked with doing something that really they haven't done in 30 years.
But before we go, real quickly, I'm guessing someone in the basement somewhere is drawing up some test maps.
That's what we hear. They deny it over there, but we're hearing there's already some map drawing going over there. And it's impossible. There's so many different ways they could go on drawing these maps, but I think the one thing you can be sure of is that Kyrsten Sinema and Ann Kirkpatrick are going to have to watch their backs. And I think especially Sinema, the CD9, District 9 in like the Central Phoenix area.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see where that one goes. Thank you all. Appreciate it very much. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.